here's a case where Zimmerman, George Zimmerman, saw Trayvon walking down the street alone in what he thought was a white neighborhood and someone who didn't belong there. So he pursued him. When he called the police, with whom he's quite familiar, they told him, stop, we'll handle it ourselves. He was determined to pursue it, trying to be, I suppose, a wannabe cop, trying to make up some points for himself. As he pursued Trayvon over the objections of the dispatcher, perhaps Trayvon sought to stand his ground. Trayvon was unarmed except for Skittles and tea. When the police came a few minutes later, he explained from his point of view why he had to kill this kid. And he turned in his gun. He walked away for 44 days. He did protests to get him into the court system. And with an all-white prosecutor team trying to avoid the issue of race as a factor, and with the jury without a black or a male on it, you had a kind of wholesale attempt to deny what was obvious to the whole world. Race was a factor in the stereotyping, profiling, and pursuing of him. The stand your ground laws lends itself to massive interpretation because it is so subjective, and it's an incentive to shoot rather than a deterrence. It's an incentive rather than a deterrence from shooting. We are free, but not equal. Free but not equal. And Dr. King reminded us that many of our freedom allies, those who help us fight barbarity, and the ridiculousness of racial segregation on its face value, may not be our equality allies. So that we are freer, less equal. Disparities in health care. We're number one in infant mortality, number one in short life expectancy, number one in lack of access to trauma care, number one in lack of access to graduation, more expelled, more jailed, more killed, more unemployed, and more now in the prison industrial complex. Now you have prisons for profit. It's a radical racial apartheid season. We did not have the right to vote. But we were breaking down barriers. I had just left jail on the summer of '63, June 5th. I was arrested for inciting a riot, which is not true. It was just we refused to cooperate with leaving downtown. And all these ridiculous charges were hurled at us. So I was arrested June 5th. Medgar was killed June 12th. An all-white jury freed the killers. One juror said that they knew the killer was guilty, but they could not imagine sending a white man to jail for a black life. Big march in Detroit led by Reverend C.L. Franklin, Aretha Franklin's father, and Dr. King. The speech in Washington. Then the reaction to that day was the bombing of the church in Birmingham. The reaction that season was to see President Kennedy as a villain. His killing was a political assassination, no doubt about that, because he was seen as, even today, there's a reaction to the very name Kennedy. In extension of that season, later on Dr. King was killed and Robert Kennedy was killed. So we faced a radical backlash of hostility during that season. But the sense that we were winning, it was dawn moving toward daylight. And surely enough, we got the public accommodation bill in '64. We got the right to vote in 1965. And things began to happen as daylight occurred. In some sense, from the time Dr. King was killed in '68, April 4th, Robert Kennedy, June 5th, we never stopped fighting. And by '84 and '88, Iran began to broaden the base of our party and to energize us. By '08, President Barack Obama ran. When President Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton ran, she won California barely. She won Texas barely. She won Ohio and Pennsylvania barely. Under the old rules, she would have been the candidate. But we democratized democracy. Opened up the process, and he became the legitimate winner of the campaign. So we were moving in sunlight, daylight. And then when he won, there was this radical attempt to eclipse the sun at noontime. And in comes a season of radical Confederate, quote unquote, Tea Party hostility. to challenge his birth, his citizenship, his religion, his person, his academic credentials. I mean, they call him liar from the well of the Congress. There's been no end to the attempt to undermine the kind of undercurrent in the last 5 years of what we gained the first 50. So today we're going to march again. It was going to be a kind of ceremonial march, kind of reflecting on 50 years ago. But now it will be a demonstration and a protest, against the rising impact of the race-driven criminal injustice system and the Voting Rights Act being eviscerated by the Supreme Court. I think the Department of Justice must intervene and deal with Trayvon's civil rights as a white boy going home pursued by a white man who killed him. But there needs to be a broader net to deal with the pervasiveness of this. This is the rise and killings of blacks and profiling and arrest of blacks is become too big to ignore. 2.5 million Americans in prison. Over half of them are African American. We're about 13% of the population. If there's a marginalized group of citizens anywhere based upon their race, whether they're in Europe, Middle East, or America, that must be addressed in the highest forum the world has to offer. African Americans are facing real human rights abuses.